Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I hope that you are all good. In today's video, I'm going to be trying out the Model Ones acrylic system again. So I did use this ages ago. You probably would have seen the video on my channel if you used to watch my videos back then. We're probably talking around 18 months to 2 years ago. And I then haven't really done much acrylic nails in ages, but lately I've been trying to push myself to get back into practicing with acrylic, and that has meant sorting through all of the acrylic systems I have in my collection, kind of trying to find the ones that I like and get rid of the ones that I don't, so that they're not taking up on any unnecessary space. So today I dug out a few Model Ones acrylic powders and thought I would give a set a go. And I've been wanting to do kind of like a baby blue set, and this is a little bit darker than baby blue, it's more of a powder blue, but I've been wanting to do a blue ombre, so I thought that's what we would do today, and I could kind of share my thoughts on the Model Ones acrylic system now. So I have felt as though I've kind of lost my touch with acrylic a little bit, so application wise it's not the best, but we're gonna roll with it. So starting off, I'm working on the Red Iguana practice hand today. I have already applied my tips and a thin clear acrylic base so that we're going to come straight in with those Model Ones design powders or color powders. Now these are acrylic and dip powders, so I don't know if that kind of affects the consistency of them, but I do find these a little bit trickier to work with than say my CJP acrylics or my Diamond Nail Supplies acrylics. Really struggling to get my words out for this voiceover. It's been a little while since I've done one. So I did find them like a bit of a wetter consistency, and I did find that they did set a little bit slower, which some people do prefer that, especially if you are a beginner and you want a little bit more time to play around with your acrylic powders, then these are certainly going to give you that. So thinking of that, when I started out I was working with them a little bit too wet, so I come in on this now and picked up my bead a little bit drier, and then because I felt as though you get a lot more time to play around with them, I found that they was a little bit harder to paint on, so they work better with that patting and pressing motion. You'll see, for example, when I started this now, I was patting and pressing it with the belly of my brush, walking it down the nail, and that worked a lot better than when I switched to try to paint it down towards the tip of the nail. So you will find that different acrylic brands, the consistency is going to be different, so it means that you're going to work differently with them, and also it depends on how you prefer working as well. So when I started playing around with these, I did find it a little bit tricky at first, but as we kind of got to the pointer finger where I'd kind of got into the role of using the acrylic a little bit more, I did find them a little bit easier to work with. But I definitely found them easier to work with in that patting and pressing motion rather than a painting motion, and it kind of depends on how I'm feeling, on which I prefer, and the kind of designs I'm doing as well. Usually if I'm doing a coloured acrylic ombre, I will just paint the colour on at the tip of the nail because I don't want to build up any thickness or bulk with that colour, but I really struggle to paint these on, so I kind of built up a little bit more thickness than what I normally would with my coloured acrylic here, because I couldn't seem to paint it on. It kept sticking into my brush or just completely pulling off the nail. But when I was patting and pressing it and walking it down the nail, it went on a lot nicer. I do have to say these colours are very pigmented as well. They do have a kind of like a creamy consistency to them and a little bit of a chalky texture. So they do go on very highly pigmented. A little bit goes a long way. So with an ombre, I usually blend the colour back into the natural nail bed area or the clear base to begin with, so that there's not going to be a harsh line where that blue ends. And then I usually just paint it down to the tip of the nail. But today, like I mentioned, we've just walked it down. So here you'll see I've kind of picked up the acrylic system a little bit more here. So I'm picking up my bead, draining the back of my brush. I probably wouldn't recommend doing that with this colour because it does work with a little bit more of a wetter consistency. So I did feel as though it worked with my brush a little bit better when my brush was more moist rather than dry. And then I'm just patting and pressing that down to the tip of the nail and just painting it out where the acrylic starts to run out. So I've got a nice thin coat of blue to begin with. It's blended out at the nail bed area, and then I'm going to come in with a second bead of acrylic and start building up that color a little bit more, just because I wanted to make sure that that blue was really popping. And then I'm trying to do the same here, just patting and pressing it from side to side. I'm really trying to get back into the flow of practicing acrylic. I really feel as though I haven't done it often enough, and I've really kind of lost the confidence in working with it, but I've really enjoyed getting back into it. I've done a couple of videos so far this year using it. I was hoping to get a few more done over for Valentine's, kind of had some acrylic Valentine's nails in mind, but time just flew away, so I didn't get a chance to do them. Now, I didn't have a nude core color in my Model Ones collection. The only nudes I had glitter in them, so I went for this one, but it just was very glittery. So what I ended up doing, it was rather encapsulating with clear acrylic. I encapsulate with a translucent pink acrylic, kind of to try and tone down the champagne color that's in this acrylic, but then how glittery it is as well, as it just wasn't what I had in mind for the design. But I wanted to make sure I'd done the whole ombre with Model Ones acrylic, so I had to just go with what I had. I think this would have gone a lot better if maybe I'd had a Model Ones pink or nude core acrylic. But I'm starting off with just taking a really small bead of acrylic, placing it down at that cuticle area, and then blending it down over that fade. I wouldn't normally do an ombre like this. Normally I would pick up my bead of acrylic and place it down right at that blend area, blend it down over the color, and then come in with my cuticle bead. But because of how glittery this is, I knew that if I did it that way, then the glitter would have overtook the blue. So sometimes when you're working with different systems, you've got to work slightly differently, and it mainly is because this glitter acrylic is jam packed with fine sparkles. It's an absolute stunning color, but it's just very, very sparkly, so it wasn't necessarily what I had in mind for the design that I wanted to do, but I still really wanted to include it because it is such a pretty glitter. And I'm not quite ready to go in with full-on spring nails just yet. I'm kind of want to have a little look on Pinterest and get some spring nail designs in mind before I kind of create any. So I did feel as though this had kind of like a nice wintry touch with it. You've got the bright blue, which does kind of still give winter vibes, but then those silver sparkles over the top just made it feel a little bit more winter than spring, which was what I wanted to go for. So I'm blending this down as best as I can. As you can see, so much of the glitter is going down over that blue, and I didn't want to cover, not necessarily cover it up because it's not covering up the color, but I didn't want the blue to look as sparkly as that. So I'm taking some monomer on my brush and just wiping off some of that excess glitter. Like I said, I'm not stressing too much how this color looks because I'd already decided after swatching it that I was going to encapsulate in a translucent pink to tone it down a little bit, and that will also soften the blend area slightly as well. But I'm still trying my best to get a nice neat blend, but I'm having to come in at that cuticle area to begin with, just because I don't want to take too much glitter down. And I am only working with fairly small beads, but it is just a very glittery acrylic. It was really pretty though, like I mentioned, and it's always nice to work with a pre-mixed glitter acrylic, as it is a little bit easier sometimes than having to go in with your clear acrylic and then your raw glitters. So I'm trying my best when it comes to applying this bead to keep it nice and neat at that cuticle area, and then also creating a not too glittery blend. So I'm going to place my bead of acrylic down using the tip of my brush and pressing it up towards that cuticle area. I definitely could have blended this in a little bit more at that cuticle zone than what I did. And then I'm simply just blending it down the nail, trying to not take my brush too far on to the blue, and doing a lot of cleanup with my brush so we don't cover up too much of that blue with the glitter, and then just wiping off the excess. Now I think this color would look really nice in a white ombre, like that champagne nudie color. with the silver sparkles would look really pretty in a white ombre, but I just didn't want to cover up too much of my blue. I did on a couple of the nails where I just hadn't pulled off enough of the glitter and it had started to set, just come in with a really small bead of blue acrylic right at the tip of the nail and blend that back, just so it's going to cover up some of the glitter that's right at the tip of the nails. I think I only did this on these 3 nails as I hadn't covered up the little finger as much with glitter as I had the others, and I'm just painting that on because I don't want to add any bulk because we do still need to encapsulate these. Talking of encapsulation, that's what we're going to do next. So here I'm using my CJP. As you can see, the pot says crystal glass. This was a pot of crystal clear acrylic, but I ended up dropping some pink acrylic in there. So I decided to just turn it into my own translucent pink by adding a little bit more in. And I did end up, I think, using 2 CJP colours to get this to be the translucent pink that I wanted. And I really, really love it for a kind of like random pre-mixed glitter that was, sorry, not glitter, pre-mixed acrylic that was unintentional. But I'm just going to come in and encapsulate the nail the same way I would with clear acrylic, but with this translucent pink. And as you can see, it tones down that glitter quite a lot, and it kind of gives off a bit of a glassy effect over the top that I really liked, but it does make the blue have a hint of a pink purple tinge to it, because obviously we're putting pink over blue, so it is going to give a bit of a purple effect. But I overall ended up quite liking how this turned out. So I'm picking up a medium-sized bead of acrylic, I can't get my words out, placing that down at the cuticle area, leaving the bulk of it in that back third for the apex, and then picking up my second bead of acrylic. I'm trying to work with this a little bit wetter as well because I didn't want to work with it too dry and then it looks a little bit more pink, if that makes sense. You lose some of that translucency. It would end up looking a little bit more opaque. So I was trying to work with it more on the wet side so that I didn't cover up the blue too much or give it too much of that purple hint. This was kind of just an experiment. This set wasn't actually necessarily going to be a video. Sometimes when I'm doing acrylic practice, I will record it anyway, and then if I want to turn it into content, I will. So this was just a kind of like, I wanted to have a practice with the Model Ones acrylic, but I wasn't sure how these were going to turn out. But I've decided to upload it to YouTube anyway, and I haven't had much content to share because it was the week off school for my 2 children. It was just too hard to juggle work and nails at the same time. So I didn't get as much content done on my channel as I've wanted to, but now they're back at school, I'm hoping to get some more out, as it has been really fun playing around and practicing with acrylic again. I do always find it a lot easier to practice on myself than the Red Iguana practice hand, but this is really good for practicing designs. But things like prep, apex building and getting a flush cuticle with acrylic, I always find that a lot easier to practice on myself rather than the practice hand. But this is what the nails are looking like so far. Off camera, I then did give them a good file and buff, kind of did need to do a fair bit of filing with this set to get them into shape and kind of get them all refined. I wasn't using the best tips either here for the Red Iguana hand, but I kind of was just trying to use up what I had before I ordered some new ones. But it did file really easily. So obviously we've got the Model Ones acrylic underneath, so we're not necessarily filing that because we encapsulated with the CJP, but they did file nice and easy despite there being a fair bit of filing to do. And I did do all of the filing with the hand file. I mainly had to debulk my sidewalls, and that was because the blue application had gone a little bit messy, so then the encapsulation layer would have gone on a little bit messy. So it did file down nice and easy. I only used my hand file, debulked the sidewalls, and then contoured the entire nail. And then did go over with my 100 grit buffer, and then again over the top of that with my 180 grit buffer, just to get a nice smooth surface and get rid of all the scratches from filing before I come in and top coated. And I decided to stick with Model Ones here, and I used their top coat as well, as I happen to had one of these in the drawer as well. And this is a really nice high shine top coat as well, and it's got quite a nice thickness to it as well. I kind of like to go over an acrylic set with a not a thick top coat, but not a super thin one, if that makes sense. So I did find this worked well. And then anyway, this was the finished result. So I really hope you all enjoy watching. Do let me know if there are any color combinations for ombres that you would like to see, as I'm going through lots of my brands of acrylic and finding some really random colors that I'd forgotten about. So I'm hoping to get some more ombre colorful sets up on my channel. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully I shall see you all again in the next one. Bye bye.